Imagine you make the best decision you possibly can. You gather the information. You weigh the odds. You act with clarity and conviction. And then it falls apart. Most people in that moment do not ask what went wrong with the world. They ask what went wrong with themselves. They rewrite the past. They convince themselves they should have known, and they carry that weight into the next decision, contaminated by a conclusion that was never really theirs to own. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of framework. And it is the central problem that Annie Duke spent a career inside professional poker learning to solve. Poker players have a word for the trap. They call it resulting. It is the habit of judging the quality of a decision by the quality of its outcome. But outcomes are not under your control. Inputs are. When you conflate the two, you build a mental model that rewards luck and punishes good thinking. A surgeon who loses a patient despite flawless technique doubts the technique. A founder who survives a reckless gamble believes the gamble was genius. Neither is learning anything useful. The psychological pain here is real. When a careful bet goes wrong, the mind reaches backward through time with a scalpel, cutting away the uncertainty that was genuinely there, replacing it with a clean, false narrative of inevitability. You feel you should have seen it coming. But the only way to have seen it coming would have been to possess information you did not have. Separating the quality of a decision from the quality of its outcome is not a philosophical exercise. It is the first act of intellectual survival. There is enormous social pressure to appear certain. To say you are unsure is read as weakness. To say you do not know is read as incompetence. So people do not say it. They perform confidence they do not have and make decisions anchored to a false certainty. Duke offers a different approach. Quantify the uncertainty. Instead of saying yes or no, say you are 60% confident. Instead of claiming to know, say you believe with moderate conviction, and here is why. This is not hedging, it is precision. When you attach a probability to your belief, you are no longer staking your ego on a binary outcome. You are building a system that can update gracefully as new evidence arrives. The courage to say you are not sure is, paradoxically, the foundation of better judgment. It lowers the cost of being wrong and raises the quality of everything you do next. We tend to think of decisions as moments of action. We choose or we do not choose. We move or we stay still. But staying still is itself a choice. Every time you decline to act, you are placing a bet on the status quo. You are wagering that the current path is better than the one you are not taking. That is a bet. It has odds. It has a cost. The problem is that inaction feels safe. It feels like the absence of risk. But that feeling is an illusion. The resources you are not deploying are leaking. The opportunity you are not pursuing is expiring. The decision you are not making is being made for you by time. Recognizing inaction as a bet does not mean acting recklessly. It means being honest about what you are actually choosing when you choose to wait. Human beings are not built for intellectual honesty. We are built for social approval. When someone challenges our thinking, the brain does not register it as a gift. It registers it as a threat. And the default response to a threat is not curiosity, it is defense. Duke's answer to this is structural. She describes building what she calls a truth-seeking group, a small circle of people whose shared goal is accuracy, not affirmation. In this environment, the social norm is reversed. Agreement without scrutiny is suspect. Dissent is a contribution. The purpose of the conversation is not to feel good about your idea. It is to find out if your idea survives contact with reality. The friction this creates is intentional, because the alternative is an echo chamber, where every bad bet sounds like wisdom, right up until it does not. We have a consistent and largely unconscious habit of claiming credit for our wins and distributing blame for our losses. Skill produced the success. Circumstance produced the failure. This is comfortable. It is also deeply misleading. The more dangerous version of this bias is not in how we explain our losses, it is in how we explain our wins. If a decision turns out well for reasons that had nothing to do with your reasoning, and you do not examine that carefully, you will carry the wrong lesson forward. You will repeat a process that was never responsible for the outcome. Duke calls for what might be described as an intellectual autopsy on success, not just on failure. The question is not only what went wrong. The question is, did what I do actually cause what happened? Luck is real. Refusing to account for it is not humility. It is a different kind of arrogance. The self that makes a decision under emotional pressure is not the same self that lives with the consequences. The present self is flooded with feeling, urgency, fear, pride, the desire to react. The future self will inherit whatever the present self chooses and will have to explain it, sustain it, and correct it. Duke borrows a framework from the business world and sharpens it into a psychological tool. Ask yourself how you will feel about this decision in 10 minutes, in 10 months, in 10 years. These are not abstract intervals. They correspond to specific emotional registers, the immediate heat of the moment, the settled judgment of reflection, and the long view of a life actually lived. When a decision looks different across those three horizons, that difference is information. It means your present self is being driven by something your future self will not thank you for. The goal is to create a speed bump between impulse and action, not to eliminate emotion, but to ensure it does not have the only vote. In poker, tilt is the state that follows a bad beat. The emotional system floods. Frustration masquerades as strategy, and the player begins making decisions that are not decisions at all, but reactions. Tilt is not unique to poker. It is what happens in the boardroom after a quarter goes wrong. It is what happens in a relationship after a rupture. It is what happens inside any person whose rational framework has been overwhelmed by feeling. The antidote cannot be applied in the moment, because in the moment you are already tilting. Duke's solution is to act before the fire starts. She calls it the pre-mortem. While you are still calm, while the decision is still theoretical, you imagine the worst-case scenario in full detail. You ask, if this fails completely, what will have caused it? And then you write a plan for that. You are not being pessimistic. You are building a roadmap for the version of yourself who will need it later, when the fire is real and the instinct is to panic. The pre-commitment contract is what your calm self hands to your future frightened self as a guide. Every framework in this book converges on a single insight. You cannot control what happens. You can only control how you decide. When your identity is tied to outcomes, every loss is a verdict on your worth. Every setback becomes evidence of failure. Every unpredictable event becomes a source of shame. But when your identity is tied to your process, the equation changes entirely. A good decision that produces a bad outcome is still a good decision. A bad decision that produces a good outcome is still a bad decision. And you are still a rigorous, honest, probabilistic thinker, regardless of what the world decided to hand you today. This is not a framework for certainty. There is no such thing. This is a framework for equanimity, for building a relationship with uncertainty that does not break you every time uncertainty does what uncertainty does. The question is not whether you will face decisions you cannot fully control. You will. Every one of us will. The question is whether, when that moment arrives, you will be judging yourself by the wind or by the quality of how you set the sails.